A woman like you was never going to give him children. Carol said it across the dinner table, and her wine glass never even paused on the way to her lips. My father-in-law set his fork down, slow. My sister-in-law looked at her plate like it had become very interesting. 11 people at that table. Not one of them looked at me. I had served 9 years in the United States Air Force. I had loaded a cargo bird at 3:40 in the morning while my left shoulder screamed so that other people's sons could come home. Carol thought I posed for posters. I wish I could tell you I said something sharp. I didn't. I just sat there and felt tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. What none of them knew, not Carol, not Brent, not the 11 people pretending to chew, was that a folder already existed. A doctor had already signed it. And the thing inside it was going to walk into Carol's church 11 months later and stand up in front of everyone she'd ever tried to impress. But to understand why a single sheet of paper could do that, you have to go back to the parking lot of a Walmart in Huntsville, Alabama, where I sat alone in my truck and cried over a test I couldn't bring myself to take. My name is Diane. Diane Vasquez Holloway, though for 3 years I was just Diane Whitfield, and that name never fit me right. Like a coat somebody else picked out. I spent most of my adult life believing a simple thing. If something is broken, you fix it. That belief got me through the service. A pallet jack quits, you find the manual override. A flight gets scrubbed, you resequence the load. The supply route washes out, you find county roads nobody's used since the Carter administration and you make them work. You adapt, you keep the cargo moving. Nobody hands you a working plan. You build one out of whatever's in the bay. Marriage, it turns out, does not run on the same rules. Sometimes you're the only one with a wrench, and you stand there fixing the same hinge over and over, while the other person quietly carries their suitcase out the back. I can't tell you the exact day my marriage started dying. I can tell you the day I noticed. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't the divorce. It wasn't even the night Brent stopped defending me, because by then there wasn't much left to defend. It was an ordinary Sunday in a Walmart parking lot, and I was holding a little plastic stick I couldn't make myself use. But I'm ahead of myself. Let me back up. I met Brent Whitfield when I was 34. He was 38. It was a fundraiser for a veterans clinic just south of Huntsville, the kind of thing with folding tables and a sheet cake, and a man playing acoustic guitar nobody asked for. I was there for the logistics nonprofit I'd joined after I separated from the Air Force. He was there volunteering with a medical group, handing out blood pressure cuffs and looking slightly lost. People liked Brent. I liked Brent. He was easy in a room, kind without performing it, smart without making sure you knew. And he wasn't scared of me, which after the service was rarer than it should have been. A lot of men got nervous around a woman who could back a trailer into a loading dock on the first try. Brent just asked me to teach him. Our first date ran 4 hours. Our second ran 6. 10 months later, we got married at the courthouse downtown, and his mother wore black to the lunch after, and I told myself she just liked black. That first year was good. Not a magazine. Real. We bought a small brick house off a county road north of town, the kind with a carport instead of a garage and a water heater that groaned when you ran the shower too long. We argued about paint. We watched football and fell asleep before the 4th quarter. Ordinary. The kind of ordinary you only understand the value of after it's gone. When we decided to have a baby, neither of us thought it would be hard. I was healthy. Active. I still ran 3 miles most mornings, even with the shoulder. Brent was a hospital administrator, surrounded by doctors. We figured biology would do what biology does. A few months passed, then a year, then 2. Then we were closing in on 3, and every single month landed a little heavier than the one before it. Here's the thing nobody warns you about. At first people leave you alone. Then the questions start. When are you two going to have kids? You'd make such great parents. What are you waiting for? Nobody means harm, they think they're making conversation. But after enough Sundays, every question feels like somebody flipping on a porch light when you're trying to stay invisible. Especially when you don't have an answer. So I did what I know how to do. I made it an operation. I tracked everything. Temperatures at 6:05 each morning before my feet hit the cold floor. Ovulation windows on a calendar I hid in a drawer. Folate. A prenatal vitamin I started before there was any reason to. I could have run a deployment with less paperwork. When my doctor floated fertility testing, I said yes before she finished the sentence. I wanted answers. Any answer. A bad answer so would have beaten the silence. The results came back clean. Everything normal. I remember sitting in my truck in the clinic lot afterward reading the same line 3 times. Relief and confusion in the same breath. I called Brent right there. "Everything looks good on my end," I told him. "That's great." A pause. "You should schedule yours, yeah?" he said. That yeah was the first delay. There would be a lot of them. Weeks turned into months. Every time I brought it up, something came up first. Work. A conference in Birmingham. A scheduling thing. The insurance hadn't cleared, the excuses kept changing clothes, but underneath they were always the same body. At the time I told myself he was busy. He was a man who ran a department. I told myself a lot of things in those years. I'm not proud of how many I believed, and then there was Carol. Carol Whitfield could insult you and make it sound like she was praying for you. That was her gift. I've never met anyone better at it. The first time we met, she hugged me, held me at arm's length and smiled. "Oh," she said. "A military girl." "Yes, ma'am." "Well, that's certainly different." Different. That word followed me around for 3 years like a stray dog. Everything about me was different. Different from what she'd wanted, different from Rachel Lindgren, the nurse Carol had picked out for Brent in her head years before I ever showed up. Different from the daughter-in-law she narrated to her friends in the church fellowship hall while the coffee went cold. Rachel. I should be fair. Never did a thing wrong. Blonde, soft-spoken, a pediatric nurse who taught the 4-year-old Sunday school class and meant it. She was kind to me, actually, in the trapped way of a person who knows she's being used as a measuring stick and hates it. The problem was never Rachel. The problem was that Erkel kept Rachel on the wall like a ruler, and somehow, every Sunday I came up short. One afternoon after church we were all at Carol's place for lunch. Fried chicken, butter beans, biscuits, sweet tea, so sweet it made your teeth ache. Rachel stopped by because she'd been helping run a coat drive, and Carol lit up like the porch at Christmas. "Rachel just has a gift with little ones," Carol announced to the table. Rachel laughed it off. "I just babysit my nieces." "No, dear. Some women are simply natural mothers." The table got quiet, not all the way, just enough. Just enough for everyone to know exactly which woman was not on the natural mother's list. I took a sip of tea. "That's interesting," I said. Carol turned. "What is?" "You've never actually watched Rachel raise a child." Her smile tightened a hair. "A mother can just tell." "Must be nice," I said, "having that kind of X-ray vision." My friend Tammy still says I should have sold tickets to that lunch. Tammy's been my best friend since basic, and she has opinions about all of them. But sarcasm wasn't enough to stop what was coming. Because Carol got bolder, not louder. Bolder, and there's a difference. She stopped insulting me outright, which honestly would have been easier. Instead, she got concerned. And concerned people are dangerous because concern sounds like love. Concern gives cruelty something nice to wear to church. She came by the house one weekday while Brent was at work. I was kneeling in the flower bed by the porch, fighting with the clay soil, and when I stood up, my left shoulder locked the way it does before rain. Years of lifting things that didn't care about my joints. I stood up slow and rolled it back. She caught it. Carol caught everything. "Oh, honey. That tone. Every military spouse and every veteran knows that tone. Your shoulder again. It's fine, that's a shame, at your age." I went back to digging. And then the real sentence. The one she'd driven over to deliver. "Children take so much energy, you know." I stopped. The trowel just sat there in the dirt. There it was. There it always was. Tucked inside every conversation like a splinter you can't see but keep finding with your thumb. "You seem worried about my shoulder," I said. "I'm worried about your future. You're worried about grandchildren." She smiled, sad and patient, like I was the difficult one. "I only want what's best for Brent." I didn't answer, because I was starting to understand something I didn't have words for yet. She wasn't talking to me. Not really. She was building a case. Every quiet month without news was another exhibit. She was assembling the file long before I knew there was a trial. The hardest part was never Carol, though. It was Brent. Every time she pushed, I waited for him to push back. Every time she crossed the line, I waited for him to notice the line existed. Sometimes he'd tell me afterward not to take her seriously. Sometimes he'd say she meant well. Sometimes he'd just change the subject to the crimson tide, and the moment would close over like water. He never stopped her, not once. One night I finally asked him. We were doing dishes, the radio low, the ordinary sound of a marriage running on fumes. "Brent, why don't you ever defend me?" His hand stopped on a plate for half a second. Then he kept rinsing. I do. No, I said. You calm me down afterward. That's not the same thing. He didn't have an answer. And the silence where the answer should have been told me everything I'd been refusing to hear. A week after that was the Walmart parking lot. Another negative test taken in the bathroom of a fast food place because I couldn't do it at home with him in the next room. I drove to the Walmart, parked at the far edge of the lot under a light that hadn't come on yet, and I sat there with a second test, still sealed in the bag, and I could not make myself open it. People pushed carts past my windshield, families loading groceries into the backs of trucks, a kid riding the cart like a scooter, an old man returning his cart all the way to the corral the way old men do. Normal life 10 feet away, behind glass. I cried harder than I want to admit. Not over the test. Over the fact that I was doing it alone. That I'd been doing all of it alone the whole time, and had only just noticed. The divorce didn't start in a courtroom. It started right there, in a parked truck, with a sealed test in a plastic bag, and the slow understanding that I was carrying the entire weight of our disappointment by myself, and that the man whose name I'd taken was not under the other end of it. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known, sitting there, was that while I spent 3 years blaming my own body, somebody already knew the truth, and had chosen every single day to let me keep blaming it. The papers were final in March. By April, I'd moved into a rental closer to town, a little duplex with a magnolia in the side yard and a landlord who fixed things on the first ask, which after Brent felt like a luxury. I went back to the rhythm of work. Disaster logistics doesn't stop because your marriage did. There's always a flood somewhere, a tornado track, a county that needs 40 pallets of water by Thursday, and a route map that makes sense. 3 weeks after the divorce was final, I passed out during a planning meeting. Not my finest hour. 1 second I was standing at a whiteboard, sketching a distribution loop for a training exercise, marker in hand, and the next I was flat on my back on industrial carpet, with 3 coworkers staring down at me like I'd been struck by lightning. Somebody had already called 911. Somebody else was fanning me with a clipboard, which doesn't help anything but makes the fanner feel useful. I'm fine, I said. I was not fine. I was nauseous and dizzy and weirdly, embarrassingly emotional for a woman who once relocated her own dislocated shoulder against a Humvee door and didn't make a sound. Tammy showed up at the urgent care 20 minutes after they called her. She took one look at me on the exam table and said, "You look terrible. Thank you. You look pregnant." I rolled my eyes. "Don't start." She wasn't starting. She was finishing. The doctor was a tired woman named Dr. Pruitt who'd clearly been on shift too long. She came in holding a tablet, sat on the rolling stool and got right to it. "Mrs. Holloway, you're pregnant." I actually laughed. The confused kind, not the happy kind. "No, you've got the wrong chart." She glanced down again. "Your test was positive. Based on your levels, you're a good way along already. Several weeks." I shook my head slow. My hands had gone cold. I remember that. How cold they were in a room that wasn't cold. That's not possible. We tried for years. Her face softened and she pulled the stool a few inches closer. "Sometimes," she said, "it happens later than anyone expects. Sometimes. Such a small, soft word for a thing that picks your whole life up and sets it down since facing a different direction." I drove home in silence. No radio. Didn't answer my phone when it buzzed. Didn't stop for the coffee I always stop for. I pulled into my own driveway, and then I just sat there, hands on the wheel, engine ticking as it cooled for the better part of an hour, while my brain tried to catch up to a body that was already weeks ahead of it. Pregnant, at 38, after the divorce. After 3 years of being told, in 100 gentle ways, that the failure lived in me. After a while I picked up my phone and opened Brent's contact. My thumb hovered over his name. I should tell him. That was the decent thing, the mature thing, probably the legal thing, somewhere down the road. And then a different memory surfaced, uninvited. Carol's kitchen. A Sunday. Her voice carrying through the doorway to where she thought I couldn't hear. "She's a soldier. Women like that don't have babies. It's just not in them." And Brent, on the other side of that wall, saying nothing. Saying nothing the way he always said nothing. I locked the phone and set it face down on the passenger seat. No, not yet. Maybe not ever. I didn't sleep that night. I kept getting up to look at myself in the bathroom mirror, like I'd catch a different woman's standing there if I were quick enough about it. I didn't feel like a mother. I felt tired and scared and, underneath it, so angry I couldn't find the bottom of it. The next weeks were a blur of appointments and exhaustion. Here's something nobody tells you about being older and pregnant. Your body keeps a ledger, and it collects. My shoulder ached constantly. Now, the rain ache turned permanent. My ankles puffed. I couldn't sleep through the night. I cried once hard because a drive-thru forgot the ranch on my order, and then I cried harder because I'd just cried about ranch dressing. Tammy thought that one was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "You survived 9 years of military logistics," she said, "and a teenager at a drive-thru broke you over a dipping sauce. I was hormonal. You threatened to call corporate. He shorted me on the ranch, Tammy. She became my emergency contact for everything. Appointments, pharmacy runs. The late-night phone calls where I spiraled about money, about doing this alone, about whether I was too old, about all of it. One night she found me on my kitchen floor, with paper spread around me in a ring. Medical records, insurance forms, the divorce decree. A woman trying to build a fortress out of paper. "What are you doing down here?" she asked. "Getting ready," I said. "For what?" I didn't have the whole answer yet, but part of me knew. If Brent found out, Carol would find out, and the second Carol found out, my pregnancy would stop being mine. It would become a church matter, a family matter, a thing discussed in the fellowship hall and decided in a lawyer's office, a campaign, and I could not survive a campaign while I was busy growing a person. So I documented everything. Dates, appointments, voicemails I saved instead of deleting. The estimated timeline. I kept copies in 2 places like I was prepping evidence for a trial I didn't know was coming. Maybe that sounds cold. Maybe it was. But the service teaches you one thing above all others, and it's this. Hope is not a plan. Hope is what you feel about the plan after you've already made it. A few months along, Tammy dragged me to a diner she loves out on the old highway, the Blue Spoon, vinyl booths the color of a swimming pool, and a pie case that spins. My feet hurt. The baby had decided my bladder was a stress ball. We slid into a booth by the window and she told me I needed protein. "I need sleep," I said. "Eat first, sleep later." A waitress came over with the coffee pot. 50s, brown ponytail going gray at the part, a name tag that said Nora in faded marker. Tammy knew her from somewhere, the way Tammy knows everyone from somewhere. "Nora, this is my friend Diane," Tammy said. Nora nodded. Friendly poured my decaf. Then she caught my last name when Tammy used it again, and something in her face shifted, just a flicker. "Holloway," she said. "You weren't a Whitfield, were you?" "Before." I went still. It's automatic by then, that stillness. I was. Nora set the pot down on the table, which waitresses don't do. "I used to work the front desk at a men's clinic over in Madison," she said carefully. "Reproductive health. Years back." I didn't say anything. The pie case spun. Somewhere a short order bell dinged. "I shouldn't even bring it up," Nora said. Tammy leaned in. "Bring what up?" Nora lowered her voice, glanced once toward the kitchen. "I remember a Mr. Whitfield. Came in a couple years back. I can't talk about anybody's private medical business, and you understand? I'd lose my certification. I'd lose worse than that." "Then don't," I said. My own voice sounded far away, but she kept looking at me and there was something almost maternal in it. "Honey," she said, "if you ever find yourself in a courtroom over a child, if a lawyer ever asks you what to go looking for," she paused, "make sure they ask the right questions about both sides." My stomach dropped straight through the vinyl booth. Tammy got it immediately. I watched it land on her face. Nora straightened up, embarrassed now, professional mask snapping back on. "I've said too much, y'all enjoy your pie." And she was gone. Off to refill a trucker's cup 2 booths down like nothing had happened. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The jukebox in the corner played something old and country, a man singing about a road he shouldn't have driven down. An elderly couple near the door argued lovingly about whether to split the cobbler. The whole ordinary world kept turning while mine tilted on its side. "Diane," Tammy said finally. I looked at the table. "He knew. We don't know that." "Don't." I looked up sharp. "Don't soften it. Not you." She exhaled. "Because she knew. Same as I did. If Brent had walked into a men's reproductive clinic before the divorce, before any of it, then he had known there might be a problem on his side. He'd known. And he had let me carry 3 years of shame that was never mine to carry. He'd watched his mother build her case on a foundation he knew was rotten, and he'd handed her the bricks. I felt it come up fast. I pushed out of the booth and barely made it to the little restroom in the back before I was sick. It had nothing to do with the pregnancy. I leaned over the sink afterward, gripping the cold porcelain, not crying yet, just shaking. The kind of shake that comes when something you'd suspected finally turns solid in your hands. When I came back, Tammy had paid the check and was waiting with my purse in her lap. "I need a lawyer," I said. She nodded once. "Okay. And I need to stop thinking like his ex-wife." She tilted her head. "Meaning what?" I picked up my purse slow, my whole body heavy in a way that had nothing to do with the baby. "Meaning from now on I think like this kid's mother. Only that. Nothing else." That was the moment it changed. Not because I stopped loving Brent. Exactly. Part of me still did, which was the humiliating part nobody warns you about either. No. What changed was simpler and harder. I stopped waiting for somebody else to stand between me and the people who'd decided I was less. The lawyer Tammy found me was Monica Alvarez, an office above a dry cleaner downtown, a window unit that rattled, and a wall of diplomas she didn't care whether you noticed. Maybe 50. Reading glasses pushed up into gray-streaked hair. She listened to my whole story without interrupting once, which is its own kind of rare. When I finished, she took the glasses down off her head and folded them. "Let me make sure I understand," she said. "You're not asking me how to keep him away from the child. No, you want to make sure that if he comes after custody, the whole truth is on the table, including the parts he'd rather weren't." "Yes." She nodded slightly. "Good. Because revenge clients lose. Truth clients tend to win." She pulled a legal pad toward her. "Here's what most people don't understand about a custody case. When paternity and parental fitness are in dispute, both parties' relevant medical history can come into the record. Through what we call discovery. If he files for rights and challenges your account of the marriage, his own history stops being a secret he gets to keep. It becomes a fact the court is allowed to see." She looked at me over the pad. "You don't go digging for it to humiliate him. You preserve it because it's true. There's a difference, and a judge can always tell which one you are." I sat with that. "How do I make sure I'm the second kind?" "You stop performing pain," she said. "You document, you stay calm, and you let the facts walk in on their own legs." She wrote something down. "Facts don't need you to be angry for them. That's the whole point of them." I held on to that line for months. Longer than that, I'm holding on to it now. My son was born on a Tuesday in October, at 4:52 in the morning, after 14 hours that I will not romanticize. Tammy was in the room. She held my hand and fed me ice chips and threatened a resident who looked at a monitor wrong. At one point, she leaned down close and whispered, "If you die in here, I'm haunting every single person on this floor." And I laughed, and then I cried, and then I laughed again, because that child of mine was already making me feel 6 things at once, and he wasn't even out yet. And then he was. One long final effort, and a sharp, furious little cry. The most beautiful sound I have ever heard or ever will. The whole room stopped. Every fear, every lonely night in that duplex, every Sunday at Carol's table. For one clean moment, none of it weighed anything at all. I named him Owen. I held him against my chest, and he quieted almost at once, like he'd already decided that was where he belonged, and saw no reason to discuss it. And I looked at his face. The gray-blue eyes, the little crease in the chin, and I knew the way you know weather, exactly whose features those were. I'd been looking at a softer version of them across a kitchen table for 3 years. But I didn't call Brent. Not that day. Not the next. I want to be honest with you about that, because it's the part people argue with me about. I wasn't hiding Owen to hurt his father. I was protecting a newborn from being born into a courtroom. There's a difference, even if it doesn't always look like one from the outside. Monica had been clear. The right move was not a phone call made on no sleep with a baby on my chest. The right move was paper, filed properly, on a timeline, so that when Brent learned he had a son, and he would learn, it happened inside a structure that protected Owen, not inside Carol's fellowship hall, where it would be a weapon before it was ever a joy. So that's what we did. Quietly, correctly, and 3 weeks after Owen came home, the paperwork did its job, and Brent found out the way these things are supposed to happen. Through a lawyer's letter, on a Thursday. He called me that same afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. Then I sat at my kitchen table with Owen asleep in the crook of my arm, and I listened to it twice. "Diane, it's me." A long breath. "Is it true? Is he?" Another breath. "Please call me back, please." I didn't call him back that day, but I want you to notice something about that message, because I noticed it, sitting there in the lamplight with my son. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't ask how the baby was. He didn't ask how I was. He asked if it was true. His first instinct, even then, was doubt. He came to the duplex 2 days later. I told Monica, and Monica had said let him with a witness present, so Tammy sat in the kitchen with her coffee, and the air of a woman prepared to throw a man through a screen door. Brent stood on my little porch under the magnolia, and he looked older than I remembered. Not hospital tired, life tired. The kind that gets into the face and stay. He'd shaved badly. His shirt was buttoned wrong by one. "Can I see?" said. I let him in. Owen was asleep in the bassinet by the window. Brent crossed the room slow and stood over it and looked it down, and I watched something move across his face that I didn't have a category for. He reached out, then stopped, his hand hanging in the air over my son like the baby was made of something that might break under a fingerprint. "He's got my chin," Brent whispered. "He does." "Diane," he turned. His eyes were wet. "Why didn't you tell me?" And there it was, the same question, just dressed differently. Not "how is he?" Not "how are you?" Why didn't you? The accounting always ran toward what he was owed. "For 3 years," I said, keeping my voice level the way Monica taught me. "Your mother told this whole county I was the reason there was no baby. And you sat at that table and let her. Now there's a baby, so you'll understand if I didn't trust the two of you with him until I had to." His jaw worked. "I want a DNA test." "Okay," he blinked. He'd braced for a fight. "Okay." Through Monica. Through the court, everything in waiting. The relief on his face lasted about a second before it understood itself. "Diane, come on. We can do this privately." Just us. No lawyers. I almost laughed. "Quiet is how we got here, Brent. Quiet is the family business." "I'm done being quiet. That's not fair. There it is." I shook my head. Every time something makes you uncomfortable, it's not fair. The test's fine. But it happens on the record. He stood there a moment, and I saw something I'd never once seen on him in 3 years of marriage. Real uncertainty. The look of a man disgusted that the old keys don't open this door anymore. The test came back exactly the way everyone with working eyes already knew it would. Owen was his. 99.9 and a long tail of nines. No courtroom gasp, no soap opera. Just a number on a page confirming a chin. The bigger thing came 2 weeks later, and it came over the phone while I was folding the world's smallest laundry. "Monica, we received the medical records we requested in discovery," she said. "Sit down for this part if you're standing." I sat. Owen was asleep in the swing, doing that newborn frown that like he's solving an equation. "Diane, Brent underwent fertility evaluation 9 months before you two separated. There was follow-up testing recommended on his side. Significant follow-up." My chest went tight even though I'd known. Even though Nora at the diner had practically handed it to me over a pot of decaf. Hearing it read off an actual record was a different animal. "Did he do the follow-up?" I asked. A pause. "No." He let it go. He was advised in writing of a likely male factor issue, and he declined to pursue it further. Male factor. 2 clinical little words for the thing I'd spent 3 years believing was a flaw in me. The thing Carol had turned into a recurring sermon. The thing Brent had known about, in writing, with a doctor's signature, while he sat across from his mother and said nothing. I didn't fall apart. I want to tell you I did, because that's the version that sounds human. But I didn't. I sat there in the lamplight with my son frowning in his swing, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt light. For 3 years I'd wondered what was wrong with me. For 3 years I'd worn a shame that had somebody else's name sewn into the collar. And now I knew with a doctor's signature that the weight had never once been mine. It had been set on my back by people who'd known better the whole time. You'd think that would make me want to call Carol and read her the record line by line. It didn't. What I wanted, sitting there, was to be the kind of person Monica described. The truth kind. Let the facts walk in on their own legs. I just didn't know yet what room they'd walk into. The room found me. An invitation came in the mail about a month later, the heavy cream kind with calligraphy a machine pretends is a person. The first Cornerstone Fellowship Community Health Banquet. An annual thing, apparently, where the church honored volunteers, first responders, veterans, and servant leaders of the county, with a sit-down dinner in the fellowship hall, and a guest list that read like the people Carol most wanted to be seen among. There was a free clinic component. Local doctors, nurses, a blood drive the week before. Real medical people gave their Saturdays to it. It was, I'll admit, a genuinely good thing the church did. I almost dropped it in the recycling. Almost. Then I saw the line near the bottom. Honoree, Women's Service Award, Carol Whitfield. For mentorship. I laughed so hard Owen startled in his swing. Mentorship. The word kept knocking around my skull all afternoon. Mentorship. Tammy came by that evening and I handed her the invitation without a word. She read it once. Twice. Then she set it on the table very gently, like it was hot. "You're going," she said. "Absolutely not. Diane. I'm not walking into that woman's church to watch her get a trophy for mentoring." Tammy sat down across from me. She wasn't laughing now. "How many people at that church still think you couldn't have kids?" I didn't answer. "How many think you cheated? How many think you trapped Brent with a baby that isn't even his?" She let it sit. "She's been telling the story for 2 years, Diane." Uncontested. "You want to keep letting her be the only one with a microphone?" "I don't want a scene. I'm not talking about a scene." Tammy leaned forward. "I'm talking about the truth being in the same room as the lie for once. That's all. Just once. Let them breathe the same air." I didn't decide that night. I sat with it a week. Part of me wanted to stay home and guard my peace and pour everything into the small warm life I'd built. But another part of me remembered every Sunday lunch. Every comparison to Rachel. Every prayer request that was really gossip wearing its church clothes. Every time Carol sharpened a sentence and slid it across the table at me while her son studied his plate. And there was one more thing. Monica had the record now. Legally obtained. Already entered in the custody file. It wasn't a secret I'd be exposing. It was a fact that already existed in writing in the court's own hands. I called the church office and RSVP'd for one, plus an infant. I did not tell Monica I was going to use anything. Because I wasn't. That part matters, and I need you to understand it. I was not driving to that banquet with a plan to detonate Carol Whitfield in front of her congregation. I was driving there to sit at a table as the mother of her grandson and refuse for one evening to be invisible. Everything else that happened, I did not set in motion. Other people did. The banquet was on a Friday in late September, warm enough for short sleeves, cool enough at the edges to remind you. Fall was coming up the county roads. The fellowship hall smelled like roast chicken and floor fort wax, and somebody's good perfume laid on too thick. Long tables, white paper cloths, sweet tea in plastic pitchers, a sheet cake from a grocery bakery, an American flag on a stand by the little stage. Veterans grouped near the front, church ladies running the room like air traffic control. First responders in their dress uniforms looking faintly embarrassed to be honored. I wore a plain navy dress that I'd had to relearn how to feel like myself in, and a little makeup I'm still not good at. Owen wore an outfit Tammy bought him, blue with a tiny embroidered fox, and he looked ridiculous and perfect, and he was, mercifully, asleep against my chest in the carrier. The second I walked in, the room did the thing rooms do. Not stop. Shift. Conversations adjusting half a degree, eyes finding me and sliding away. People always notice. That's the cruelty and the use of small towns both. Carol found me inside 30 seconds, of course she did. She crossed the hall in pearls and a smile that arrived a full step ahead of any warmth. Diane. Carol. Her eyes dropped to the carrier, to Owen's sleeping face. And for just a flicker, I almost missed it, something genuine crossed her own. Because even at 11 months old, that baby had her son's whole face stamped on him, and there was no theology in the world that could argue the chin. The flicker passed. The mask came back. "Well," she said, "isn't he growing? Babies do that. We'll have to have you both out to the house sometime." She did not mean it. We both knew she did not mean it. Family is family. It is, I agreed, and let her hear that I meant it differently than she did. A few of the church women drifted over, the kind ones, and made over Owen the way kind women do, and for a little while it was almost nice. An old veteran in a VFW cap stopped by my table and shook my hand and said, "Thank you for your service, ma'am," and meant it, and I felt my throat go tight, because it was the first time anybody in that building had ever said those words to me. Carol had spent 3 years telling people I posed for posters. This stranger in a cap knew the difference on sight. That's the part the family never understood. The warmth always came from outside. The colder my own people were, the more it stung when somebody who owed me nothing was kind. Dinner happened. Announcements happened. They honored a volunteer firefighter who'd pulled a family of 4 out of a flood that spring, and the room stood and clapped, and it was good, and I clapped too with Owen stirring against me. Then they got to the awards, and Carol went up to the little stage. She accepted the plaque with practiced humility. Thanked the pastor. Thanked the committee. Thanked the Lord. Thanked her late husband. And then she started to talk about womanhood and motherhood and what she called the foundation of a Christian home, and at first it was the usual banquet fare, the kind of speech that washes over a room full of full stomachs. Then it turned. The way it always turned with Carol. Slow, like a creek finding the low ground. A strong family, she said, smiling out at all of us, requires women who understand that the home comes before pride, before careers, before whatever else the world tells young women to chase these days. A few heads nodded. She felt it and leaned in. Now, not every woman is called to motherhood, we have to be honest about that. Some women pursue other things. Status, a title, a uniform, a pause just long enough. And there's nothing wrong with serving, but raising a family, that takes a different kind of woman. A softer kind. The kind willing to be poured out for somebody besides herself. The hall got warm, or maybe that was just me. I felt the old kitchen close in around me, the butter beans and the sweet tea and the splinter sliding back into my thumb. She wasn't looking at me. That would have been too obvious for Carol. She didn't need to look at me. Half the room was already glancing my way, and then pretending they weren't. She'd built this story for 2 years. Everybody in that hall had heard her version. The soldier who couldn't, the career woman who wouldn't. And now, the cherry on it, the woman who'd turned up with a baby, nobody could quite explain, and an ex-husband who wouldn't talk about it. I looked for Brent. He was at a front table next to his mother's empty chair, and he was looking down at the white paper tablecloth, hands flat on either side of his plate. Silent. Exactly the way he'd been silent at every table I'd ever shared with that family, and something in me went very still. Not angry, tired the way the hook of all this started. I thought I could get up and walk out right now, take my son home, let her have her trophy and her story and her room. I could keep my peace. I almost did. I had Owen half unbuckled. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, sitting there with my hand on my sleeping son, was that 2 tables over, a man in a navy sport coat had set down his fork and gone very pale. His name was Dr. Aaron Feldspar. He was a urologist from a clinic in Madison, one of the doctors who volunteered every year for the free health screenings the church ran. He'd been at the banquet all evening, 3 tables back, eating roast chicken, and half listening like everyone else. And somewhere in the middle of Carol's speech about soft women and hard women, he had turned to look at the silver-haired woman being honored for mentorship, and then at the man sitting beside her empty chair, with his hands flat on the tablecloth, and a memory had surfaced that he could not put back down. Because Dr. Feldspar remembered Brent Whitfield. He remembered him from a consultation room. He remembered a follow-up that never got scheduled. He remembered the way a careful doctor remembers, a man who had been told something true and had chosen to walk out of the building and never come back. He didn't stand up and announce it. Doctors don't. He sat there with his jaw tight and his ears going red, listening to a woman accept a mentorship award by implying, to a room of 200 people, that the quiet veteran in the navy dress was barren and bitter and probably a liar. And he knew, he specifically of all the people in that hall, that it was the exact reverse of the truth. I learned all of this later. At the time, all I saw was a stranger 2 tables over set down his fork. What happened next, I did not plan and I did not start. I need to say that one more time, because it's the whole point. Monica Alvarez was at the banquet. I hadn't asked her to come. She'd come because her own father was being honored that night as a Vietnam veteran, a man she'd never once mentioned to me, a man in a wheelchair at the front table, with 3 rows of ribbon on his chest. Small county. Everybody's threads cross eventually. Monica had been my lawyer for over a year. She knew the file better than I did. She knew, because it was her job to know, every document in the custody record, including the one with the signature on it. And she sat there at her father's table, listening to Carol Whitfield monologue about soft women. And she watched me reach down to unbuckle my son, so I could leave. And something in her, the truth kind of person, the kind she'd told me a judge can always spot, decided that she was not going to let a lie finish its speech, uncontested in a room with the truth sitting right there in it. She stood up. Not fast. Not dramatic. A 50-year-old woman in a charcoal blazer rising from a folding chair, the legs scraping the linoleum, a sound like a church clock striking in the middle of a prayer. The room turned toward it the way a room turns toward any small wrongness. Mrs. Whitfield, Monica said. Her voice was level, courtroom level, it carried without rising. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll only need a moment and then I'll sit right back down. Carol's smile faltered. This is a private event. I don't believe we've. My name is Monica Alvarez. I'm an attorney here in the county. A beat. And I'm the attorney of record for the woman you've spent the last 5 minutes describing without using her name. The hall went so quiet I could hear the window unit cycling in the back wall. I had Owen half out of the carrier. I froze with my hands on my own child. Sit down, please, ma'am. The pastor started gently from the side of the stage. This isn't the. I'll be brief, Pastor. And then it's entirely your call. Monica didn't look away from Carol. Mrs. Whitfield, you just told this room that some women aren't built for motherhood. That some women are too hard, too career-minded, too, what was the word? Poured out only for themselves. And everyone here knows who you meant, because you've made sure they know, for 2 years, at every lunch and every prayer circle in this county. Carol's hand found the edge of the podium. I don't know what you think you're. I think, Monica said, that you've been allowed to tell one side of a story for a very long time, because the other side is a quiet woman who doesn't believe in making scenes. I happen to have the rest of that story in a file. Legally. Entered in a custody record. Obtained through proper discovery, signed by a physician. She paused. I'm not going to read it to you. I'd never do that to a child's father in a church. But I'm going to ask you to stop, right now. Because the part of this you've built your award speech on, the part about whose body failed that marriage, is not true. And there are people in this room tonight who can confirm that it isn't, under oath, if it ever comes to that. And that was when Dr. Feldspar stood up. He didn't say a word at first, he just stood. A middle-aged man, in a navy sport coat, pushing back his chair at table 7, and the simple fact of a doctor rising to his feet in support of a sentence about medical truth, landed on that room harder than any speech could have. Carol looked at him. She didn't know him, but the whole hall watched a physician stand up and quietly back the lawyer, and you could see the math start to happen behind 200 sets of eyes. I treated a patient some years ago, Dr. Feldspar said, and his voice was careful, clinical, giving nothing away that he wasn't entitled to give. I won't name him. I won't discuss his file. I took an oath and I'll keep it. I'll only say this much, because it can be said without breaking anything. He looked at Carol not unkindly. Roughly half of all fertility difficulty in couples involves the man. Half. It is the single most common thing I correct in people's assumptions, and it is almost always the last thing a family wants to hear. When a marriage doesn't produce a child, this county, every county, points at the wife. The medicine does not support that. The medicine has never supported that. He let it sit. I'll leave it there. But I won't sit here and let a good woman be called Barren in a fellowship hall when I know what I know. Nobody moved. And then Brent stood up. For a second I was sure he was going to defend her. Old habits don't just die. Sometimes you have to watch them not die, right in front of you. His chair scraped back. The whole room turned to the man at the front table. The silent man, the one who'd never once filled the silence. He looked at his mother. He looked at me and at Owen against my chest. His hands were shaking and he didn't try to hide it. She's right, he said. His voice cracked on the second word and he let it. The lawyer's right. The doctor's right. He swallowed. I knew, before the divorce. There was a problem on my side, and I was told, and I didn't tell anyone. I let my mother say things about Diane that wasn't true. For years, I sat at that table I let her, because the truth was about me and I was a coward about it. You could have heard a hymnal page turn. Brent, Carol said, and her voice had lost its music entirely. Sit down. You don't know what you're saying, sis, you're upset. I'm not upset, Mom. I'm finally telling the truth. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, the way a man does when he's past caring who sees. She carried it, all of it. The whole county thinking she was less, and it was me. It was always me. And the worst part, his voice went to almost nothing. The worst part is she'd have kept carrying it forever to keep the peace, and I'd have let her. I sat very still with my son, and I did not say one word. I didn't have to. Monica was right about that too. The family was being shamed by other people's respect for me, not by anything that came out of my mouth. I just held Owen and let the truth stand on its own legs in a room that had spent 2 years believing the lie. The pastor stepped to the podium and said something kind and de-escalating about grace and about taking a moment, and the banquet sort of has dissolved around the edges, the way these things do. No shouting, no thrown plates, just 200 people quietly rearranging everything they thought they'd known. Carol stood at the podium holding a plaque for mentorship, with no one left looking at her the way she needed them to. After, in the gravel lot, under a sky go purple at the seams, the witnesses found me. That's the part I didn't expect. Not the speeches inside. This. The old veteran in the VFW cap came up first and took my hand in both of his. My grandson did 2 tours, he said. I know what that loading dock costs a body. Don't you let anybody in there tell you what you are. He squeezed once and walked off before I could answer, the way men of that generation do when they've said the real thing. Then a woman I half recognized from the church kitchen. I sat through 100 of those lunches, she said, low and fast, almost ashamed. I never said anything. I should have. I'm saying it now. I'm sorry. And she was gone too. And then Rachel Lindgren, the nurse. The ruler Carol had measured me against for 3 years. She came across the gravel in her good shoes, and she stopped in front of me and her eyes were red. I always knew she was using me against you, Rachel said. I hated it. I'm not. I was never the better daughter-in-law, Diane. I was just the quieter weapon. She looked at Owen. He's beautiful. I'm glad somebody finally said it out loud in there. I should have been the one. I'm sorry I wasn't. 3 people, none of them family. Every one of them telling me, in the gravel, the thing my own people never could. Tammy appeared at my elbow with the diaper bag and a look on her face like she'd swallowed a sunrise. Told you, she said softly. Truth in the same room as the lie, just once. The consequences came the slow way, the way they do in a small place. Carol's mentorship award got quietly delisted from the church bulletin the next month. Nobody announced it, it just wasn't there. The lunches stopped including her, at the head of the table. People are gentle in the South, but they have long memories and longer pews. And a woman who'd called another woman Barren in the fellowship hall, while the truth sat 11 feet away in a navy dress, did not get to keep her seat at the center of things. She wasn't cast out. She was simply, gradually, no longer believed. For a person who'd lived her whole life on being believed, that was its own kind of weather. Brent and I had our real conversation a week later, at my kitchen table, with the door shut and Owen asleep down the hall. He sat across from me and turned a coffee mug he wasn't drinking from. For a long while, neither of us filled the quiet. Silence has a way of making people fill it, and I'd learned to outlast him at it. I keep thinking, he finally said, about all the times you asked me to schedule my testing. And I just didn't. I know. I told myself I was busy. I wasn't busy, I was scared. And it was easier to let you think it was you. He looked up and his eyes were wet again. How do I even start to fix that? There it was. The old reflex, fix it like a hinge. You don't fix it, I said. Some things don't get fixed. They just get carried better by the right person going forward. I turned my own mug a quarter turn. You spent 3 years letting me carry a lie. You can spend the rest of your life carrying the truth about your son. Consistently. Not when it's convenient. Not when your mother's watching. Every week. Diane. His voice broke all the way. I'm so sorry. I should have stood up at that table the first time. Not the last time. And I believed him. That's the thing I have to be honest about. Because the easy version of this story is one where I never forgive him and ride off clean. This isn't that, he cried at my kitchen table, a grown man finally telling the truth 8 years too late, and I believed every word, and it still didn't put back what those years took. I forgive you, I said. I'm not going to carry being angry at you forever. It's too heavy and I've carried enough. I held his eyes. But forgiving you and trusting you are 2 different roads. You'll see Owen. You'll be his father on the record, with all of us watching you do it right. And your mother does not get him alone. Not ever. That's not revenge. That's just the new arrangement and it's not up for negotiation. He nodded. He didn't argue. For the first time in our whole history, he didn't say it wasn't fair. That was 18 months ago. Owen's is 2.5 now. He has his father's chin and, his preschool teacher swears, my refusal to be rushed. Brent shows up. Imperfectly, the way real people do, but he shows up every week, and he has not once let his mother take that little boy out of his sight. And I have watched him become, slowly, the man he should have been at that dinner table years ago. Some damage you don't undo. You just stop adding to it. Carol and I are civil now. Less than warm, more than cold. She held Owen for the first time at his 2nd birthday, supervised on my porch, under the magnolia, and she cried, and I let her, and neither of us pretended it healed anything. She said quietly, I was wrong about you. 4 words. Years too late, but real. I've learned that late and real still counts for something, even when it doesn't count for everything. I'm Diane Vasquez Holloway again. I took my own name back the month the custody arrangement was signed. My shoulder still tells me when it's going to rain. 2 days early every time. I still arrive 15 minutes early to everything out of a habit the service beat into me. I still don't trust easy, and some mornings I still catch myself grieving the marriage I thought I had, the one that existed mostly in my own willingness to keep fixing it. But grief and peace can live in the same chest. I know that now, I didn't used to. People think the loudest revenge is the best one. The speech, the exposure, the room full of gasps. Mine had a little of that. I won't pretend it didn't, and I won't pretend the gravel lot apologies didn't feel like rain after a drought. But the part that actually saved my life wasn't loud at all. It was a folder kept in 2 places. A lawyer who told me facts don't need me to be angry for them. A diner waitress who risked her certification to point me toward the right question. It was saying no, on a porch, without feeling guilty about it. And it was this, most of all. My son is going to grow up never once having to earn the love in his house. He will never wonder if he was wanted. He will never carry a shame that belongs to somebody else, because his mother set hers down and refused to pick it back up. Neither did I have to earn it. It just took me 38 years and a parking lot full of strangers to believe that. If this story stayed with you, sit with one question tonight. Have you ever carried a blame that was never yours to begin with? A thing somebody else handed you because it was easier than holding it themselves? Leave a comment and tell me. I read them. And if you've ever had to rebuild a life after someone let you take the fall, I hope you hear this part clearly. Surviving it was never the weak thing you were told it was. It was the strongest thing you ever did. One thing before I let you go. The mechanisms in this story: preserving your own medical records, requesting documents through proper legal discovery, establishing custody and paternity on the record instead of on a handshake, are real instruments used every day by family attorneys all across the United States. Laws differ from state to state, and what protected Diane in Alabama may be structured very differently where you live. So if anything here made you think about your own family, please don't act on what you heard in a video. Sit down with a licensed family attorney in your own state and bring your questions in writing. And if you or someone you love is walking the long road of infertility and carrying shame that isn't theirs to carry, Resolve, the National Infertility Association, runs a free support helpline at 866-668-2566, and you can find them at resolve.org. They will tell you what a urologist told a whole fellowship hall that night. It is, so often, not your fault, and it was never only the woman's to bear. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a doctor. I'm just someone who wanted to tell a story about a woman who put down a weight she should never have been handed. Put yours down too. You've carried it long enough.